people are beginning to see the impact that citizens can have on this thing, in addition to moving some of these reforms forward, as well as the journalism side out there.
I'm Justin Silverman of the New England First Amendment Coalition. During the last several months, we've been working every day extremely hard to make sure that those who are out in the streets covering protests on behalf of their newsrooms have the information they need, know what their rights are. We've been working to make sure that those who value open government and want to know what their state officials are doing on their behalf during this pandemic, for example, have that information. We can build trust in those that represent them. But we can only do this work with your support. So please, if you haven't already, visit NEFAC.org, click that donate button, and support our work today. I'm here with Dan Bevarly, Executive Director of the National Freedom of Information Coalition. Dan, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Justin. Thanks for the invitation to be here.
Dan, so over the last several weeks, NEFAC has been using these weekly conversations to really spotlight the work that journalists in particular have been doing to really highlight the deficiencies in their state public record laws when it comes to law enforcement in particular. So police misconduct records, for example, very difficult to get oftentimes. And then while this is occurring, various legislative efforts throughout all New England states have been going on, discussions about how to open up law enforcement agencies, make them more transparent and ultimately more accountable to the people. You lead an organization, a national organization that's been keeping track of all of these transparency efforts in all 50 states. Can you tell us what's on your radar? What kind of trends you've been seeing? What have you been paying attention to lately?
Yeah, so the George Floyd killing there in Minneapolis just sparked another big challenge for transparency, and open government advocates out there. I know you have been busy up in New England working there as well. You've been doing a wonderful job on the COVID-19 health records. I know you've been busy trying to pry those from some of the public institutions up there. And then this has been added onto everybody's plate as well. But it's a very, very important topic because, since 2009, this organization has partnered with the Media Law Resource Center and some other groups out there to do a biannual open government survey. And one of the questions that we ask in that survey every time is, what is the most difficult agency to get public records from? And it's been consistent on every survey. It's always been law enforcement has been the biggest challenge. So this is something that continues to be top of mind. But again, until something like this just happened, a lot of people were trying to make headway on these things. And now, the situation has become an opportunity to really move forward to see some sustainable reforms in transparency, particularly around misconduct records and disciplinary actions that are taken by these agencies. So we've seen this across the board. Where the different state coalitions are working with other groups out there to move forward on these reforms, because a lot of people who weren't here 6 months ago in terms of supporting this now are on a side, and they're interested in seeing more transparency in this area.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I know you and I, we've spoken about this in the past. We've always been pushing for more transparency within police departments and law enforcement agencies. But now it seems like there's this groundswell of support for change. And we've seen it in some states that have already passed certain legislative efforts. Some are still debating changes and reform that can occur. But I imagine from state to state, those efforts must look very different. I mean, I don't need to tell you, but for those who aren't familiar with public records law, it varies from state to state. States like Massachusetts, for example, notoriously secretive and have a very bad, to be blunt, very bad public records law that doesn't provide a lot of transparency. Compare that to where you are in Florida, where it's written right into the Constitution, and there's a presumption that government provide records unless there's a compelling reason otherwise. So what have various states been doing on their own to combat this kind of secrecy and really take advantage of this moment?
Well, looking back, there was a research done on this topic dating back to like 2015. New York, I think it was New York Times or one of the New York newspapers up there had looked into the different states to see how easy it was to access disciplinary files, complaint records, and that. And at the time, they had it. It was accessible challenging and impossible, to get the records. Since 2015, only 2 states moved in that combination there. So it gives you an idea of that. And that was California and Colorado, which we've seen big changes happening there. So it's not something that's moving quickly until now. And so we're looking at a lot of the different states in terms of what they're doing and how they're doing it to bring about some of these reforms and sustainable reforms. I mean, there's a number of reforms that are being done in policing right now. Our focus is on the transparency side, access to information that wasn't there before to get there. So we've seen cases like in California where they've been able to rescind the laws there. We saw the work that was done in Colorado, certainly in New York there with the 50A, and then also Illinois is one that's also moving forward, where the Supreme Court recently sided with the city of Chicago not to destroy those disciplinary records from the Chicago Police Department. That's now being appealed right now. So a lot of the groups, certainly you need a good coalition of organizations to work on this. Usually this has always been driven by the news media, or mostly likely on that. There's still a lot of groups out there now that are continuing to get on this. Certainly the public show of sentiment out there with the protest and some of the riots have added to that as well. But you're beginning to see more of a diverse group of people that typically wouldn't participate together are joining to move forward on these reforms.
Yeah, it's a great point, and one that we hit on often, is that when it comes to transparency in public records, we're not just talking about newsroom efforts. And I feel like up until recently, that's how a lot of police transparency related issues were framed. This is an effort by a particular newsroom in a state to get the information they need to report their stories. But now, and tell me if you disagree, but it seems like now there's more of a reframing occurring where police transparency has become a citizen issue. This isn't an issue just for journalists and newsrooms. This is an issue for all of us as citizens who want to know more about our police departments, either local or state, and we want to make sure that we have a better understanding as to what they're doing and making sure that they're serving the public, right? Have you seen that kind of transition in how this issue has been framed and those who have come to support it over the last several months?
We have, and the NFOIC had and it's posted on our website. You can view it there. But we had a discussion about a month and a half ago where we brought together some different groups to talk about this. We had the legislator from Colorado who helped move the legislation forward there, but also on that panel was the president of NACO, which is the National Association of Citizen Law Enforcement Oversight. And these are groups that work with citizen police advisory boards around the country. And Susan Hudson, the president there, was talking about that they have been extremely busy fielding calls from different municipalities and counties out there that are looking to put together these boards. And they've been around for a while, but now people are beginning to see the impact that citizens can have on this thing, in addition to moving some of these reforms forward, as well as the journalism side out there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great part of what's happening right now, is that we're bringing in all community members, and that this has really transcended newsroom efforts and have really brought in all of us towards this one goal of more transparency. On that front, talking about transparency specifically, have you seen any common efforts from the state? Can you give from the various states? Can you give us more of a perspective as to what trends, if any, you're seeing across the country and all of the various coalitions, NEFAC and otherwise? Are there specific aspects of law enforcement that it seems like all coalitions or all states are grappling with right now?
Well, I think that the challenge around getting access to the disciplinary records, that's kind of top of mind. I mean, that's one where many of the groups have felt that if they can, break into that information, or actually not break into it, but actually get the access that they should have in the beginning, that's going to open the doors for a lot of other areas there. We've seen areas where, many people have gone after the 1033 purchases under that DOD to see what kind of military equipment that police departments have been purchasing and having there. We've seen a number of requests looking at the geographic makeup of police departments in terms of how many of the police officers actually live within the districts that they're responsible for being in terms of the jurisdiction. So there's a number of different areas out there, in addition to just the disciplinary side, that can really lead forward through some of these transparency efforts there.
Excellent. And now I should mention, NEFAC has been a longtime member of the National Freedom of Information Coalition. Many years ago, the NFOIC helped NEFAC really get its start and provide some momentum for us as an organization when we were beginning. What kind of role do you see your organization, the NFOIC, really providing as we move forward? What kind of support are you looking to provide coalitions like ours when it comes to following through on these police reform efforts?
Yeah, I think that one of the best roles that NFOIC can play on that is to facilitate a lot of the conversations that are occurring across the jurisdictions there. When you have a common challenge like this, it's great to have a forum to be able to share with other people and ask your peers and other jurisdictions out there what's going on in your state. First of all, what are the laws related around access to these records do you have? And you can find some other states out there that have similar access opportunities like you and say, how are we working on this? I think a good example was when we had the increased use of police body cameras. Everybody was chatting with the other groups out there, what's available. And then of course the data that was being recorded, how was that being treated from jurisdiction to jurisdiction in terms of who had access to it? How many of them had to wait until an investigation was over to get access to that? Some states out there qualified them as training resources, so they became personnel files, so people didn't have access to that. So just this idea of being able to work off each other in these areas here and share information, that's where you guys get the information and contribute it back to the others, which then go into any kind of reforms from the legislative side or from the policy side that you all are doing, working with your public institutions out there.
That's great to know. And, I had you on today because I wanted to talk about law enforcement and some of the trends and efforts that you've been seeing. But, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention, we're still in the middle of a pandemic. We still have a number of executive orders throughout the country that are in play, limiting people's access to information and open meetings. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that and what NFOIC is doing specifically when it comes to pandemic-related challenges to the public's right to know about government.
Right. Well, you were there with everybody else during Sunshine Week when this thing kind of, hit the fan and all of these emergency declarations and executive orders were passed that rescinded the open government laws in the different jurisdictions out there. And started making it challenging for people to get access to information. We had everything from, we'll take your requests, but don't, hold your breath, to we're not taking your requests, which was, really something else that we saw. And then we saw a number of public institutions, governing bodies go to virtual public meetings. And of course, the problems that brought on, both technology problems as well as procedural problems going on. So that's been really where we've been working a lot is access to information and access to deliberations. And we've been hearing from all the coalitions out there around the challenges going on. The concern is that among a number of journalism groups as well and individuals like yourself is picking your battles. In terms of where you're going for on some of this. So as we know, journalists pretty much know what kind of information they should be asking for and what kind of information to hold off on. Because if any of this stuff becomes challenged, the concern is, you're going to get the courts are going to be siding for some of these public institutions out there, and that's going to be a concern. It's going to set the bar lower from that standpoint of what you can access. However, what we're looking at now are a number of these executive orders have been extended and the virtual meetings continue, but in some jurisdiction, they're going back to in-person meetings. And now what that's going to create is a health question for the public and for journalists of wanting, if they can feel safe to go to an in-person meeting to cover it. And of course, we're hoping that these virtual meetings, they can get it right. You've done a great job up there in terms of recommendations that you've made to some of the public bodies up there of how to carry out a public meeting that's inclusive with participation. And so hopefully we're going to see these continue going forward and complement the traditional side. But the other concern that we have are things like we saw in New Jersey, where the governor had declared in his executive order that due to the emergency, they can rescind those open government requests. The legislature has picked up on that language and now has a law in New Jersey that qualifies an emergency to be able to pull back on transparency, but emergency isn't really defined. So what will constitute an emergency going forward? That might be a court challenge going down the road here. So looking into the future, this new normal, the concern we have is that we don't come out of this thing 10 years back from where we were with a lot of the FOI victories that we've been able to accomplish, that people like yourselves and other coalitions have worked hard to be able to have happen there. And the other side is, one of the things that we're also looking for is what this cost of transparency might start to look like. A lot of cities and states are going to be hit really hard with revenues and coming in. And one of the concerns we have is that they're going to look at some of these areas of open government of how they might be able to use those for revenue models or to save money. For example, we've already seen in Las Vegas where they've upped the price of police body camera footage to like $280 an hour. We've seen another state where background checks, criminal background checks, increase sixfold to be able to access that. The other concern we have is a lot of states where there's fee shifting, so that if there is an open government lawsuit and that agency loses, then they have to pay the attorney fees of the opposing side. We could start to see legislatures backing away from that as well. So instead of shall provide fees to may provide fees. So that's an area that we have a lot of concern. So as we come through this year, when we start to get into 2021 legislative sessions, we're going to really be vigilant in terms of what we start to see happening out there on around the cost and access to public records and meetings.
Yeah, I think that's the most important takeaway here is the vigilance. You know, we just cannot take our eye off the ball. We have to stay vigilant, and we really need to, stay involved and not let our guard down, whether it's law enforcement, the pandemic, or really any other open government issue. So I appreciate all the work that the NFOIC is doing and has done. If people would like to learn more about the National Freedom of Information Coalition or get involved, how do you suggest they do so, Dan?
Well, let me give a plug. We've got, they can go to our website, nfoic.org. We have an annual FOI summit that we've done every year in September that you're going to be participating in again this year. We're going to be doing it virtually. So it's like for $25, people to be able to attend this. So you can go there. We have some sessions related to just what we talked about today. So we would love to have people come and participate in that. And you can get information there from our website. And if I can just add one more thing, I just want to tell you, I think, Justin, you've been doing a wonderful job up there in New England. And for anyone watching this video and watching you guys and following you, please give to NEFAC and support what they're doing. They're doing major work on your behalf out there to keep your First Amendment rights strong.
Thank you for that, Dan. I appreciate it. And thank you again for your time. Great conversation, and good to see you.
Thanks for calling. Take care.